Hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the podcast. My apologies for the delay we had. It's always the way. Everything works perfectly until you're just about to go live and then your microphone disconnects and you have to reset things. So my apologies. My name is Andy. I'm the clinical lead here at ReadyCare. And today what we're going to talk about is what everyone wants to know post-Christmas. How to lose a stone, how to get off that quality street belly that we've put on over the Christmas period, all with the best of intentions. You go into it and you go, look, I'm going to have a little bit on Christmas Day, and then you struggle for 7, 8, 9, 10 days, 2 weeks to get slowly off the mince pie train. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is a couple of things. My background is I'm a clinician, but my background is I'm in science. So I like to talk about the science of how weight loss occurs because it's news to a lot of people, actually. We've had this nonsense rhetoric of you just need to eat less calories and burn more, and that's how weight loss works. That's just beyond reductionist and oversimplified. Today, what we're going to talk about is how weight gain happens in the first place, understanding the hormonal cascade that leads to what we call de novo lipogenesis, fancy long-winded way of saying new fat storage or gaining fat, particularly visceral fat around the midsection. And we're also going to look at how to get it off. So more practical stuff around food choices. So let me just kind of indulge yourself a little bit when we go into the science for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll kind of step back a little bit, take a broader view and look at what food choices we can make. I'll also kind of walk you through what I eat when I'm looking to drop weight quickly or just get my body fat down. Okay, so let's start with this, which is just more around the science of weight loss. So understanding insulin production and how that relates to weight gain. This is just massively important if you understand this. Now, bear in mind, there's a couple of different ways of looking at weight loss, and that is, no, wrong slide deck, 1 second, no. The two different ways of looking at weight loss are, let's find that in the other one. No, wrong deck. Okay, not to worry. So the two different ways of looking at weight loss are as follows. You have the old school paradigm, which said, and by the way, this is mostly propagated by the food industry and the big food, really. The food industry love this. This is the calories in, calories out hypothesis of weight gain, which states that, and again, there were studies put into this by Coca-Cola, who founded the Energy Balance Foundation, and Nestle, who all wanted to say, look, everyone calm down. Don't be worrying about sugar making you fat. Look, a can of Coke has roughly the same amount of calories as half of an avocado. So, I mean, a calorie is a calorie. And ultimately, you eat too many calories, you will gain weight, and it's kind of your own fault. That was the implicit message or narrative that was put out there for the last 30 or 40 years. So we look at people who have weight and weight around the midsection, and we go, he's obviously eating more food than he requires. There's a little bit of greed or lack of self-control implicit there, which is not the case, actually. You know, saying that it's somebody's fault because they, say, for example, if someone has an alcohol problem, saying that you're taking in more alcohol than your liver can process is about as useful as the message that you're eating too many calories. The why is the important part. I mean, we've alcoholism in my family. I'm not going to go to that beloved family member and go, you're drinking more alcohol than water. That's the problem. I figured it out, because they will go, yeah, no crap. You know, I know that, but why is it happening in the first place? And actually, as we look at the processed food industry, we understand that the foods that have been marketed to us as quote unquote healthy, the whole grains, the low fat, the low calorie, the diet stuff, which is just pumped full of emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and they actually have scientists they pay to establish what's known as a bliss point, which is what's the sweetest and most addictive we can make this food before it becomes unbearable. So believe it or not, a Reese's peanut butter cup, they've actually looked at brain scans and gone, this is the sweet point, pardon the pun, where they get the most endorphin release, the most addictive response to it without being too sweet. That's known as the bliss point of a food. So they actually hire scientists to find that out. The food that you're eating and those type of things, all right, it might be 80 calories or 100 calories, and the avocado might be 200, is designed in a way that gets you addicted to it. So when people say, oh, you're just eating too much, you're taking in too many calories, what they're not acknowledging is why. Why are you eating too many calories? Why are you compulsively eating this food? Why are you hungry every 2 hours? And what's the hormonal effect of that food? Does it make you want more in the case of a bowl of cornflakes or cereal? Or does it make you full for 5 or 6 hours in the case of a ham and cheese omelette? And that last point is crucial. I'll get into the hormones, which are known as ghrelin and leptin, and why satiety or feeling full is way more important than the total caloric set value of a food. All right, let's jump into the science here for a little bit. So, and sorry, just to fill in that point, the old school paradigm was Calories in, calories out. You're tipping the balance too much. It's your fault. Stop eating as much food and do more exercise. And by the way, exercise is broadly useless for weight loss unless your diet is conducive to you losing weight in the first place. There's some really interesting research around that where they put like 500 people in each group, one on a whole food diet and exercise for 2 hours, 5 days a week, and the other group on the same whole food diet with no exercise. And the difference in terms of weight loss is the group that was doing 10 hours of exercise a week lose 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds more over 6 months. So if you're pounding the roads trying to lose weight, you are wasting your time. I'm not saying you shouldn't exercise. You absolutely should. It could save your life. From a mental health, cardiovascular health, cancer prevention, blood sugar control point of view, it's hugely efficacious, hugely effective. Not good for weight loss. Okay. I'll do a separate topic on that actually, because I'll do a separate talk on that over the coming weeks. We must put up a new schedule for February anyway. All right, let's have a look at the science of it again there. So, all right, so this is what causes weight gain. Now, I often say in seminars that I do, I know it sounds totally counterintuitive, and I'm not suggesting this is the way you should structure your diet, but if you go to McDonald's every morning and instead of having a quarter pounder with cheese, you ask for a double quarter pounder and you take the buns off, you will lose weight. So is that a good way to eat? Is that cheese highly processed and might it be inflammatory? Yeah, of course it is. But just strictly speaking, from a macronutrient point of view, you will lose weight. It's very well established. The main driver in any combination of foods that has fats, proteins, and carbohydrates of new fat storage is overwhelmingly the carbohydrate. And the reason for that is carbohydrate is metabolized as glucose, all digestible carbohydrate, not fiber, is metabolized as glucose. Glucose spikes a hormone called insulin. You'll hear me talking about insulin all the time. The pancreas secretes insulin. So when you eat something, let's say, for example, you have eggs and avocado on toast. What happens is your body says, well, carbs are the easiest one to derive quick energy from. So I'm going to break down the carbs as glucose. This is news to a lot of our diabetic patients in the NHS work that we do before we show them how to reverse their diabetes. And they say, I had no idea there was 8 spoons of sugar in 2 slices of whole grain bread. I had no idea there was around 14 spoons of sugar equivalent in a bowl of porridge, and so on. So it's not that all carbs are bad, and that's a blanket statement. Personally, I don't eat any, but from a weight point of view, it's not that all carbs are bad. There's varying degrees of, good and bad, which are better and worse when it comes to carbs. But refined, processed carbohydrates, grains, starches, and sugar all end up as sugar in your blood. There's no argument over that anymore. It's very well established. So refined carbs, so the cereals, the granola bars, and this one, look, I mean, it's the hardest one to sell to people, including doctors, cardiologists, including porridge, is not good for your blood sugar control, is not good for your weight. Is it better than Cheerios or Crunchy Nut cornflakes? Yes, arguably it is. Higher in fiber, slightly more slow releasing. Is it good? No. So if we use the context, that's important to bear in mind with this. You've got a bowl of Cheerios, Crunchy Nut cornflakes, Lucky Charms. It doesn't matter. They're all varying degrees of bad. You've got about 18 to 22 spoons of sugar in your blood equivalent after eating those. It's not all sugar. There's a fair bit of sugar in them, but all the carbohydrate boils down to sugar in your blood. In a bowl of porridge, about 13, 14. In a eggs and avocado in the morning. Greek yogurt with strawberries, almost none. Somewhere between 0 and 1 spoons of sugar equivalent in your blood. Now, why that's important and why you keep saying spoons of sugar equivalent in your blood, all dietary carbohydrate, with the exception of insoluble fiber, metabolizes down to sugar in your blood. So what carbohydrates are, and I mean, I covered this years ago. I did a master's about 14 years ago. And even then we knew it, but we just didn't connect the dots. Carbohydrates are chains of glucose holding hands. And when the bile hits them, they break up into molecules of sugar. So we understand very clearly that a potato is roughly the same as having, 3/4 of a can of Coke. There's no real difference except the speed at which it hits the bloodstream. So you could say, well, potatoes are much better than a can of Coke because it's delivered into the bloodstream a little bit slower, that sugar, which is kind of like saying if you're dealing with liver issues, well, a pint is much better than a shot of vodka because it's delivered much more slowly to the liver. And it's a similar enough analogy. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar enough. So the total volume of sugar that ends up in your blood is really important because what happens is, as we see in this, your pancreas, which is an organ that sits in just alongside the liver, secretes a hormone called insulin. Insulin has 2 main jobs when it comes to its physiological role in the human body. One is to store fat, and I'll come to that in the second one. And the other is to drive glucose out to the cells where it can be used for energy. Now, the human body has roughly a capacity to deal with, in a rational, sensible way, about 1 spoon of sugar equivalent 4 grams of carbohydrates. And beyond that, it becomes actually quite toxic. And we tend to have in a bowl of cornflakes or porridge 80 or 90 grams of carbs, which is, 20 times what we need. So insulin production goes up very high. We secrete loads of insulin. And this is really important and really well established. I'll show you in a second. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. And let me just talk about what happens here now, just for anyone who's into the science. And this is a bit technical, but I'll draw back from it in a second. This is well understood and well documented in the clinical literature. Insulin causes secretion of a hormone called lipopolylipase, which breaks out what are known as triglycerides into glycerol and fatty acids, and glucose drives that into the cell where it gets locked in. So glucose gets locked into the cells in the form of triglycerides, and that's where you get new fat storage. And then the opposite happens on the way back out. So basically, if you have high insulin levels, it is almost impossible to lose weight. Now, I'd say that again because this is really important. So if your insulin levels are high, so if you're eating foods that spike your insulin levels, so like breakfast cereals, rice, pasta, granola bars, you're kind of grazing on that stuff all the time, your blood sugar levels go up. Your body does what it should. It's not a dysfunction. Insulin comes up and tries to lower down your blood sugar levels, and it does, but you eat more and it keeps going back up. You're constantly in a fat storage state. Now, if your insulin levels are high, it locks glucose into the cells, it locks fat into the cells. You cannot burn fat. Now, why this is important, I'll give you a really good example. Sometimes people think a calorie is a calorie, I'll just eat whatever, I'll burn it off in the gym. If you're going into the gym or you're going for your walk and you're having a bowl of porridge before it, and I see this all the time. It used to break my heart. I used to feel like going over to people and saying, look, I have a background in this stuff. Do you mind if I give you a little bit of advice? I used to see a girl going into the gym every day in a gym I used to go to in Middleton. And she'd go in with a granola bar or some sort of a high sugar protein bar, and she'd be sipping a bottle of Lucozade as if she needed that for energy. And she was obviously overweight and probably at the gym trying to lose weight, doing her best. Now, in that current environment, so in that situation, her blood sugar levels would have been trending high, insulin would have been high, so she would likely have put on more weight because of that session than lost more weight. That's pretty obvious summation from what I could see. So, you'd love to go over and say, the last thing you need, if you're, by the way, I wouldn't, I'm not stupid, but if I wanted to give someone like that advice, I would be saying the last thing you need is a bottle of Lucas. And the nonsense advertising that goes into helps elite athletes go on for longer, it does. And then you see kids standing around outside Centra drinking 500ml bottles of Lucozade and Monster Energy drink. That's just 24 spoons of sugar in your blood. And you're not going to burn that off at all. You're going to damage your pancreas and probably end up type 2 diabetic if you keep it up in the long run. So this idea that energy drinks, are good for you somehow because they give you carbs and sugar is it's such a dangerous messaging. But anyway, that's a whole different seminar. So if that girl in question wanted to lose weight, if she understood the biology and the basic biology, which is that sugar secretes insulin, causes secretion of insulin, causes fat storage, and you can't burn fat when your body is storing fat because your insulin is high. And also, all carbohydrates turn to sugar. If she dialed her carbs down and stopped exercising, she'd probably drop a stone in 6 or 8 weeks. So it's just unfortunate that you see that. Okay, that's a little bit on the science. And again, this is really well understood. There's a really good slide here. Let me just find this. Sorry for skipping about now. No, it's in the other one. 1 second. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is the blood sugar equivalent of common foods that we eat all the time. Now, why this is relevant is, remember the first slide, when your blood sugar levels are high, your body secretes insulin and we store fat. So if we look at the blood sugar equivalent in terms of foods, we can start to say, well, actually, we should probably have less of those and our insulin level will go lower and you lose weight. And it's almost as straightforward as that. I mean, fat loss is a really complicated thing. Essentially, you're looking at biology and hormones. But ultimately, the main lever that you want to pull to elicit lipolysis, which is a fancy way of saying fat burning, is you want to get your insulin level low. And we do that by eating less of these foods. So rice, potatoes, and often people will say, well, basmati rice is 10 spoons of sugar. I heard that brown rice is way better for you. I'll let you decide. Brown rice will leave you with about 8.7 spoons of sugar in your blood, 150 gram serving, which is small. White rice will leave you with 10 spoons of sugar in your blood. A chicken salad with avocado and cheese and a bit of mayonnaise will leave you with 0 spoons of sugar in your blood. So you decide which is better. So is it technically correct to say that brown rice is better than white for weight loss? Yes, but barely. I mean, it's a relative reduction as opposed to an absolute reduction. The absolute reduction would be dialing carbs way down. Potatoes, you're talking about 9 spoons of sugar and 150 grams of potatoes, and it's easy to eat 250, 300 grams of potatoes. Chips, same thing, 7, 8. Spaghetti, white, again, that's a small serving. I know 180 grams. When I weighed what my mum would serve, it's double, if not triple that. So you're talking 6 to, I don't know, 10, 15 spoons of sugar. And all the way down. Bananas, about 6. That's probably conservative. I've seen 7 or 8, and so on. And by the way, the wholemeal small slice is talking about that kind of what's it called, McCambridge type stuff, 3 or 4 spoons of sugar. But again, you'd easily have 2 of those or more. So if you look at broccoli, eggs, chicken, fish, almonds, mushroom, cheese, steak, full fat Greek yogurt, basically whole foods that aren't processed and beigey bland type foods give you almost 0 spoons of sugar in your blood. So just a colossal difference between the two. So this is just an interesting graph to look at. Now, like I say, I'm a clinician. My background is in science. So it's not fair for me to just overlook the first principle of science, including health sciences. And that is, I can't say correlation, 2 things that appear to look together, equate to causation. So I can't say that, the implementation of the low-fat guidelines caused the corresponding and concurrent explosion in obesity and diabetes and hormone-positive cancers, heart disease, and so on and so forth, Alzheimer's, dementia. But I can say that they happen together at the same time, and it's certainly worth looking at. So whenever you see a correlation, 2 things correlating, you have to say, well, where's the control group? So the low-fat guidelines were implemented in the Western world. From remote tribes around the world didn't get the memo that fat was suddenly trying to kill them and meat was suddenly trying to kill them. In fact, it's very well established that the sugar industry paid off researchers to say saturated fat may be the root cause of the explosion in diabetes, heart disease, which is ridiculous. But anyway, those are the facts. You'll often hear that on podcasts like the Joe Rogan podcast and so on. Very well established that happened. And all of that, if you're interested in reading it, is documented very well in a book by Professor John Yudkin. It's called Pure, White and Deadly. And there's loads of other books like that talk about this. But so we see, if you look at the obesity from 1950, the rates in obesity from 1950 to 1970, 20 years went up like 2%. The rates of obesity from 70 to 80 went up 0.5%, 0.5% in 9 or 10 years. From 1980, so late 70s, we saw the implementation of the low-fat guidelines. A couple of generations later, not even a couple of decades later, I should say, doubling every 10 to 12 years in obesity. And obesity is as high as 48% in some states in the USA. And we might laugh and go, the big overweight idiots in the States. We are just behind them in Ireland and the UK. So again, because we follow the processed food guidelines that say saturated fat and meat is bad. And sugar is, sugar, just be careful with sugar. Sugar is the cause of, no doubt, sugar, processed refined carbohydrates, seed oils are the cause of at least the main contributing factor when it comes to most chronic diseases that afflict us in the Western world. So the reason I say correlation, 2 things correlating, doesn't mean equating, and I'll get on to practical examples in a second, is because if you look at remote tribes around the world, like these guys, they don't have an obesity epidemic. Why? Why is it? Now, often the first argument I hear when I go through the 8 or 9 examples of this is, oh, they're doing more exercise. Nope, not true. When you account for exercise status, there is no difference in the outcomes. So that's a fancy way of saying, if you look at the females who stay back and take care of the family and the more, old school, old fashioned gender specific roles, as we'll say, there's no difference. If you look at elderly populations where they're infirm, incapacitated, have had a head trauma when they were out hunting, anything at all, and they can't move, you don't see any increase in obesity. So they're out hunting all day long. This is just a way of shooing away the fact that they eat all the foods that we're told not to eat in terms of red meat, internal organs, saturated fat, cholesterol, and they never get chronic disease. I say never, but it's less than 1%. It's like a huge anomaly. Whereas here, 65% of people over the age of 55 are on 2 or more prescription medications for lifestyle-related diseases. I say that again. Over the age of 55, 65% of people over the age of 55 are on 2 or more medications from stuff that's mostly caused by diet. So pre-diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and so on. Okay, so it's very clear that one of us got it wrong. And I often use the kind of thought experiment that maybe if we're definitely right that we should follow low-fat guidelines and be careful with fat and meat, we should all hop on a bus and go over to the remote tribes around the world, standing there with their spears and their six-packs and say, lads, you've got it all wrong. You need these low-fat yogurts. Deirdre from Skinny World said that we need to eat this blueberry muffins because they're only 80 calories. It's nonsense. It's beyond clear that we've got it wrong and they had it right all along. And what I mean, I say that to say that the ancient, ancestral, appropriate, evolutionarily appropriate diet that we followed for 2.4 million years isn't suddenly trying to kill us, but only since the 70s at all. In fact, it looks like our great-grandparents had a way better idea intuitively of how to eat than we do. I mean, we're eating foods now, like I see Pop-Tarts and muffins, and if you look at it, it's got about 60 ingredients on the back that you can't even pronounce, let alone has your biology had time to understand what to do with that without causing a big cascade of inflammation and disease. Okay, so this is just interesting. Somebody brought this up before, and they said, well, maybe we didn't comply with the guidelines. Maybe it was our fault. We did, actually. We ate 38% less butter after the 80s. Our egg consumption went down 18% because everyone was told that it contains cholesterol and that might be the cause of heart disease. Animal protein went down 13% and people started eating these horrendous things like Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat and all that sort of stuff. And by the way, those guys infiltrate into those big food conglomerates, infiltrate into media and messaging and reports and quote unquote studies. There's a new twin supposed study type thing gone up on Netflix and it's sponsored by Beyond Meat. So they've pumped about 3 or 4 million into the production of that. It's complete and utter nonsense, so don't waste your time. But there you go. We've eaten less animal protein, more grains and more sugar, and we've seen an explosion in obesity, type 2 diabetes, what we call diabesity, the diabetes and obesity combined syndemic. I mean, our metabolic health couldn't be worse. Most people have one or more risk factors for cardiovascular disease. This is just interesting, just backs up the whole insulin side of things. If you look at patients with type 2 diabetes and you get them to, you put them on insulin therapy. If you put them on conventional therapy, so you put them on a little bit of insulin, they gain a little bit of weight over time. If you put them on a good bit of insulin, they gain loads of weight over time. It goes up, 5-10 kgs in a couple of years. And that weird picture there is just showing localized insulin injection. So he was injection of both sides of his stomach. You actually see the lipolysis, the fat storage in those areas. And that's known as lipohypertrophy for anyone who's interested. Okay, so the question is, which is better for weight loss? Is it low carb or low fat? Now, when it comes to low carb, the first red flag for most people, and rightly so because of the way we've been conditioned, is, oh, but if I eat meat and full fat dairy and, I have a couple of eggs a day, surely my cholesterol is going to go up and my heart disease will get worse. So we've won the International Scholar Award from the American Heart Association for showing that that is absolutely categorically not the case. 26 out of 26 what we call biomarkers or indicators for cardiovascular health got better, significantly better, not worse. And that includes cholesterol, inflammation, triglycerides, waist to height ratio, visceral fat, diabetic glycemic control, fatty liver reversing, everything. Absolutely everything. Nothing got worse. So that's well understood now. In fact, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology have released consensus statements over the last number of years saying saturated fat is not a nutrient of concern and people can now eat as much cholesterol as they want. Yet, unfortunately, we live in this terrible world where money and collusion and bribery occur on a daily basis, and then you get infiltration into the guidelines. You get nonsense sort of Daily Mail headlines like eggs might increase your risk of diabetes. It's just nonsense. So you really have to be careful as to where the funding comes from and what agenda is at play in the background. So the question here, if you look at randomized controlled trials, these are the highest level of evidence where you put 100 people on a low carb diet, you put 100 people on a low fat diet, and then you tell them, I want you to exercise twice a week, both of you. I want you to drink this amount of alcohol, and you basically keep everything controlled except the diet element of the study, which would vary. And then you look at who lost the most weight sort of stuff. So these are really high level studies. There was 31 of them that were high kind of quality. And this is from the Public Health Collaboration.org. It's a charity in the UK, actually headed up by Dr. David Unwin, an absolute trailblazer when it comes to reversing diabetes and obesity and stuff. 31 out of 31 studies showed significantly more weight loss on low carb when the amount of calories was the same. So you're on 2,000 calories low carb, you're going to lose probably 50% to 80% more weight than somebody on 2,000 calories low fat. And again, it's because we understand the action of insulin. All right, so that's it. How do we drop a lot of weight in 8 weeks? I want to make a couple of points here. You do not need to count calories unless you wish to do so. What will happen is your body will organically, if you're following a lower carb diet, your body will organically tell you that you want to eat less. So we've seen this. It's such a profound thing that happens to our patients in the NHS, where they'll say to us, well, look, I'm used to going to Slimming World and I'm used to going to Weight Watchers. So can I count my calories? And I'll say you can count your calories if you want, but you're going to see a reduction of at least 600 or 700 calories if you're eating real food. The best way to picture this is if I say to you, eat as many calories as you want today, and I say on the menu is 12-inch pizzas, Ben & Jerry's, chocolate bars, bottle of wine, and a couple of cans of Coke. You or certainly I would comfortably get to 8,000 calories, no problem at all. I'd probably get to 10,000 calories if I wanted to. If I was being totally honest and wanted to be, you go on that roller coaster cycle where you're like bloated, so full, never going to eat again. Ooh, a peanut butter bar in the fridge. Half an hour, 40 minutes later. Now, if I say to you, I want you to eat 8,000 calories, but I want you to do it only with boiled eggs, avocado, chicken breasts, and fatty steak, you will not get past 3,000 calories. It's impossible. It's so difficult to do. Maybe not impossible, so difficult to do. So why is that? It's because of the hormonal effect that the food is happening. So the latter group of foods, the whole foods like eggs and avocado and meats and stuff like that, they're ancestrally appropriate, and your body says, I've had enough. Protein elicits a hormone in the blood and in various different tissues and organs in the body known as GLP-1. This is glucagon-like peptide 1. And actually, this is what makes you feel full. It optimizes hormones called ghrelin and leptin that your brain says, I've had enough. I mean, if you want to see loads of GLP-1 entering your bloodstream, eat 6 boiled eggs. And you'd be like, I can't get past the 5th one. I just feel so sick. Or 4 chicken breasts, the same thing will happen. So GLP-1 is the new wonder drug. Ozempic, Saxenda, what are the other names it goes under? Wegovy, these ones that the aegis like Kardashians are promoting, and celebrities and people stupid enough to go on them instead of just eating protein. And I say that with respect because, you know, often your doctor will prescribe it. But that GLP-1, Wegovy, Saxenda, those drugs are Ozempic. Those drugs are basically GLP-1As, which is a GLP-1 agonist. It promotes secretion of GLP-1. You can do that. You can eat loads of carbs and sugar and then inject yourself in the stomach every day or every week with something that tells your body you're a bit more full and causes muscle wastage, and God knows what the long-term side effects of it are. Pancreatitis, potentially pancreatic cancer. Or you can eat more protein. That's it. Okay, so the foods that you want to reduce for optimal weight loss. And guys, if you have any questions, by the way, I'll wrap up in 5 minutes. Pop your questions in there. Now, I love questions because it's everyone learns from your question. I'd love to hear from you guys. The foods that you want to reduce for optimal weight loss. I'm not saying never eat these foods. Personally, I don't really eat any of these foods, but it's entirely up to yourself what degree you want to reduce these foods down. Breads of all descriptions, white, brown bread, sourdough, although sourdough is a little bit better. Rice and pasta, again, this is why you'll see people eating spiralized noodles, which is spiralized courgette, and cauliflower rice. This is the reason supermarkets are starting to cater for people who understand the science of weight loss. Breakfast cereals, definitely eat less breakfast cereals, no doubt. I haven't eaten a breakfast cereal in, God, I'd say 10 years anyway. Personally, I usually have eggs, avocado, coffee with a bit of cream, Greek yogurt with strawberries, that sort of stuff. Real food. Although you can get keto or low carb granola recipes online, which are pretty decent. Fizzy drinks, there's a really interesting study where they looked at keeping 2 diets the same. They put one group on Diet Coke a couple of times a day, the other group on normal Coke a couple of times a day. No significant difference in terms of weight loss. And that's because the diet drinks contain artificial sweeteners like aspartame, which are so close to sugar in terms of where what your body perceives it to be. Excuse me. That it causes roughly the same physiological effect. Your body has an anticipatory response and says this feels like sugar and starts to produce insulin anyway, so it causes you to get fat. But again, in moderation, I wouldn't worry about them too much if you're only having one a day or 3 or 4 a week. Cakes and pastries, and I include scones and that. Sometimes people say, oh, I'd never eat cakes and donuts and stuff. If you're eating a scone, it's the same thing. Or granola bars for that matter. Starchy vegetables, including potatoes and sweet potatoes. And I promise you, it's been the bane of my life trying to convince thousands of Irish people over the years that starchy vegetables like potatoes cause weight gain. And sweet potatoes are the same, yet people for some mad reason think they're a little bit better because they're slightly higher in fiber and beta carotene. Yet if you ask anyone that, I had a dietitian said to me before, sweet potatoes are way better than potatoes. And I said, why? And she just stopped in her tracks. She couldn't really explain it, just gave me some waffle about vitamin A and retinol and stuff like that. They will contain roughly the same amount of sugar and carbs as a potato. Starch will break down the sugar in your bloodstream, will cause a hormonal responsive secretion of insulin, which leads to de novo lipogenesis, new fat storage. So potatoes make you fat. I'm sorry, and I don't like it, and I love potatoes, but there you go. High sugar fruits like bananas, grapes, those sort of things, as a general rule, eat berries and not a whole lot more. And that leads me to this, the foods that you want to eat more of for optimal weight loss. And this sounds totally counterintuitive. Weight loss, better cholesterol levels, more specifically your HDL going up, your triglycerides going down, reversing fatty liver disease. So I'd say that again, because you look at the foods and go, huh? Reversing fatty liver disease. These are the foods we use to reverse fatty liver, to lose fat, reverse fatty liver disease, optimize your cholesterol levels. And again, I'll do separate sessions on fatty liver and cholesterol levels. Meats of any description, bar the very highly processed meats that have a ton of sodium nitrates and stuff like that in them. Fish and seafood, with the exception of, personally, I'm not a fan of salmon just because it's so heavily farmed and it's very rare that you get organic wild-caught salmon. The reason you know if it's actual wild-caught salmon is it'll almost be a blood red color. Now, don't be fooled by the farm salmon where it says on it, wild Atlantic, what do they call it? Ballyskillen, like the likes of Aldi and Lidl are great at labeling to fool people where they go, oh, that sounds wild. And then you look at the back and it says farmed in Vietnam or farmed in Norway. And they feed them pellets. They're an awful yucky gray color, so they inject them with colors and stuff. It's just not healthy. So organic salmon, wild caught that you might get in a market or something will be extremely expensive. Like a fillet the size of your hand will be like €25. So that's how you know if you're getting the right stuff. I don't, because it's way too expensive. But any fish, I think the benefits of salmon are actually overblown because like trout and mackerel and stuff like that have roughly the same amount of omega-3s, but there you go. Cheese, like full fat cheeses, things like cheddar, brie, camembert, whatever stuff you want, blue cheese, whatever stuff you like. The only ones I would avoid there would be things like Calvita slices and stuff like the heavily processed cheese strings, that sort of stuff. They tend to have a lot of seed oils in them and are quite pro-inflammatory. Green vegetables, any vegetable that grows above the ground will help you lose weight. Eggs will help you lose weight, will improve your cholesterol and your heart health, particularly if they're replacing a sugary crunchy nut cornflake or a bowl of porridge in the morning. Avocados, chia seeds, olive oil, real butter, although like somebody shouted out in a seminar before, what the hell am I going to put it on when you take away the potatoes and everything else, but I throw it on my cauliflower or veg or my steak. And full fat dairy, so full fat Greek yogurt with berries. They're the foods that are going to help you lose weight without counting calories and feel fuller. Okay, these are just some kind of references. Key takeaway points, guys, and if anyone does have any questions, pop them in the comment section now, otherwise I'll wrap up in a couple of minutes. Key takeaways when it comes to losing weight. Exercise is amazing for your overall health, your longevity, disease prevention. It's useless for weight loss, and that's beyond clear from the literature, yet people will still argue with it. The second thing is your diet will elicit the vast majority, if not all, of your weight loss. It's going to be 90+%. The other key things are going to be sleep, which is very important. Hydration, not as important, but still important. And stress levels, massively important that as much as possible you control your stress levels, because stress causes a spike in hormones like norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol, and elicits central nervous system activation. And basically you get like fight or flight hormones that say, I feel like there's some tension going on. Here's sugar in your bloodstream. Remember insulin and fat storage. Here's sugar in your bloodstream to give you fast energy. So it breaks down glycogen in your liver, in case you're wondering where the hell does that sugar come from if I'm not eating it. So low grade stress, not good for you. Acute stress, really good for you. So you go, well, how can stress be good for you? Exercise is acute stress, sauna is acute stress, ice baths are acute stress, but low grade chronic stress and inflammation are extremely bad from a stress point of view. Hence why things like meditation, relaxing, exercise itself are really, really good for helping you to kind of lower down those stress hormones and add a little bit to weight loss. The food type is the main driver, guys. If you're looking at something, if you're picking something up in the shop and you're reading the label, first of all, you're probably in the wrong place if you're reading a label. So the reason I say that is when we go into the supermarket with my family, I have 2 young kids who are 6 and 7 who eat this way as well, and my wife as well. We'll go around and we'll do the fruit side, we'll do the vegetable side, we'll do dairy, we'll do meats, we'll go to the meat counter, and that's about it. We'll go for teas and coffees and milk and stuff like that, and that's about it. I don't go into the inner aisles in the supermarkets all that much, aside from toiletries and stuff like that, because everything within that outside perimeter, just think it is trying to kill you to some degree. So that's the best advice I can give you. If you're looking at food labels, I always look at carbohydrates and sugar, and I want to keep that number as low as possible. But broadly speaking, we don't buy a lot of stuff with loads of stuff in the labels. Like 3 or more ingredients is usually the warning sign that you're heading into not good for your physiology. Keep your carb level low, fat and protein, eat it in a whole food form to the point that you feel full and you will lose weight. You will drop a stone in 8 weeks if you have a stone to lose. Guys, I hope you found that useful. Pop a comment in if you did. And if you have any suggestions as to what you'd like me to cover over the coming months or in February, we're going to be looking at women's health. We're going to be looking at neuroscience topics. Chloe, our neuroscience lead, will be looking at that. Probably a little more on weight loss, maybe exercise, things like that. And yeah, a couple of other bits. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate you being here and taking the time out of your day to hear me rambling on about the science. Have a good one, and I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.